Imagine an iceberg floating in the ocean. The part that emerges above the surface is small and visible, but the larger part of its structure remains submerged, hidden from view. The human mind works similarly. The visible part represents consciousness, everything we know about ourselves, the thoughts we believe we control, and the decisions we make deliberately. But beneath this surface lies the unconscious, a vast mental territory that holds repressed memories, instinctual impulses, traumas, deep desires, and automatic behavior patterns that quietly shape our perception of reality. Without us realizing it, this hidden side of our being influences our emotions, reactions, and even our failures and successes. Have you ever caught yourself acting in a way you couldn't explain? Or repeating the same mistakes without understanding why? This happens because the unconscious acts like an invisible script that dictates behaviors and choices. Many of our decisions, including those we judge to be rational, may be reflections of past experiences we don't even consciously remember. Carl Jung dedicated his life to the study of the unconscious and realized that many people live trapped in automatic patterns without understanding their origins. Repressed emotions, inexplicable impulses, and repetitive cycles of suffering often result from this hidden part of the mind. However, he discovered that those who learn to recognize and integrate these unconscious aspects gain more autonomy over their choices and transform their own existence. This process is not just an intellectual exercise, but an essential step toward a more authentic and conscious life. The first step is to accept that within us there is an invisible universe operating beyond our immediate perception. By exploring this inner territory, we gain clarity about who we truly are and why we behave in certain ways. And it is precisely this process that Jung called individuation, the search for deep self-knowledge and the integration of the different layers of our psyche. For Jung, true human development was not just about acquiring intellectual knowledge or following social norms. He believed that psychological wholeness could only be achieved when there was integration between the conscious mind and the unconscious. This process, called individuation, is the path through which an individual discovers their true identity, accepting both their light and shadow aspects. The unconscious is not just a repository of forgotten memories, but also a space where repressed aspects of our personality reside. Often, what bothers us most in others may be a reflection of what we deny in ourselves. Someone who strongly rejects arrogance may, in fact, have difficulty expressing their own self-confidence. Another person who avoids confrontation at all costs may be suppressing their anger and allowing others to overstep their boundaries. When these aspects are not recognized, they emerge in unexpected ways, such as emotional explosions, unconscious sabotage, or destructive choices. Individuation is not a destination, but an ongoing process of self-discovery. It requires a willingness to confront internal truths, recognize unconscious patterns, and deal with aspects of one's personality that may be uncomfortable. Avoiding these issues does not eliminate their effects. In fact, it makes them manifest unconsciously. For example, someone who fears rejection may realize, upon investigating their past experiences, that this fear originated in childhood due to a lack of emotional validation. By understanding this origin, it becomes possible to reformulate one's own sense of self-worth and strengthen emotional security. Jung stated that the great risk of avoiding this process is living in a fragmented way, without a clear sense of identity. People who do not undergo individuation often feel an inner emptiness and seek to fill it with distractions, superficial relationships, or the approval of others. They follow automatic patterns without understanding why they remain trapped in the same cycles. But those who delve into this journey discover a new level of freedom, a state in which their choices are not dictated by fear or others' expectations, but by an authentic connection with who they truly are. By integrating unconscious content, a person becomes less vulnerable to external influences and more prepared to deal with internal challenges. This does not mean eliminating conflicts or negative emotions, but rather developing enough maturity to understand and transform them into growth. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, but rather about becoming whole. As someone becomes more self-aware, their view of life transforms. Emotions cease to be just uncontrolled impulses and become valuable signals, indicating internal aspects that need to be understood. Self-knowledge brings clarity about desires, motivations, and limitations, allowing choices to be made with more intelligence and purpose. For example, imagine someone who always gives in to others' desires and avoids confrontations out of fear of rejection. By recognizing this pattern, this person can begin to develop their ability to set healthy boundaries without guilt or fear of disapproval. This simple adjustment can profoundly change the way they relate, making them more secure and strengthening their self-esteem. Another powerful effect of individuation is the way we face challenges. Many people, when facing difficulties, adopt a passive stance and feel like victims of circumstances. But those undergoing this psychological growth process learn that every obstacle brings an opportunity for evolution. A loss, a rejection, or a failure are no longer seen as signs of defeat, but as learning experiences. This shift in perception reduces the fear of making mistakes and helps avoid destructive cycles of regret and stagnation. Without individuation, life can seem confusing and meaningless. Many settle into patterns that only bring dissatisfaction and frustration, but they cannot identify the root of the problem. This generates not only mediocrity but also resentment and a persistent sense of emptiness. Those who ignore their need for inner growth often find themselves trapped in a mechanical existence, reacting to external events without true autonomy. On the other hand, when someone takes responsibility for their own development, they begin to see new possibilities. The feeling of being lost diminishes and gives way to a more solid sense of purpose. This journey not only strengthens identity but also improves the quality of relationships, as those who know themselves better tend to make choices more aligned with their values and goals. Individuation does not guarantee a life without challenges, but it provides tools to face them with resilience and wisdom. Since childhood, we are taught about the importance of belonging to group. Families, schools, religions, and societies in general create rules of coexistence and behavioral patterns that shape our worldview. However, there is a fundamental difference between healthy belonging and the annihilation of individuality. When the desire for acceptance becomes stronger than the need for authenticity, the risk of losing one's own identity increases. Often, the search for belonging leads people to adopt beliefs and behaviors without question. Collectivist movements, whether political, social, or religious, offer a ready-made framework of thought in which the individual just needs to fit in. At first, this may seem comfortable, as it eliminates the need for reflection and decision-making. However, over time, the cost of this conformity becomes evident. The loss of the ability to think critically and make decisions based on personal experiences. When someone blindly surrenders to an ideology or a group, their opinions cease to be the result of their own reflection and become mere echoes of what others say. This phenomenon can be observed in various spheres of life. In the young person who joins a cause without deeply analyzing it, in the adult who follows social patterns without questioning if they align with their values, and even in those who reject any differing viewpoint out of fear of being excluded. The danger of this behavior is that it prevents personal growth. A person who depends on the group to define their beliefs loses autonomy and, over time, may feel a deep emptiness. The mind enters a state of conflict, where what it truly feels is suppressed by what it believes it should feel to be accepted. This kind of internal alienation leads to a sense of anguish and discomfort, as there is a distance between the true essence of the individual and the identity imposed by the group. Jung warned of this risk, emphasizing that individuation is an essential process to prevent the dilution of personal identity in the collective unconscious. This does not mean rejecting any idea shared by a group, but rather analyzing them critically and deciding if they make sense for one's life. A self-aware individual can still be part of a larger movement, but without becoming a prisoner of it. History offers countless examples of how the nullification of individual thought can lead to disastrous consequences. Wars, persecutions, and injustices were often driven by ideologies that convinced crowds that the collective was more important than individual responsibility. When critical thinking is replaced by dogmatism, any absurdity can be normalized as long as everyone agrees with it. Escaping this trap requires courage. Thinking independently can be uncomfortable, as it means taking full responsibility for one's own choices and consequences. However, it is this autonomy that defines an authentic life, in contrast to an existence shaped by external influences. Reflecting on beliefs, examining decisions, and seeking answers within oneself are essential steps to breaking free from the dependence on collective thought and achieving genuine freedom. True freedom arises when someone feels comfortable acting according to their values, without the constant need for external approval. Those who undergo this process find independence that no group can offer. Individuation is not about isolation, but about being true to oneself while relating to the world in a conscious and balanced way. Life is filled with unexpected challenges, and many people feel trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction, not knowing how to escape them. However, what truly distinguishes those who overcome difficulties from those who feel suffocated by their problems is not the absence of obstacles, but rather how they handle adverse situations. Individuation strengthens the internal structure of the individual, allowing them to face life's challenges with greater stability. Instead of being dominated by emotional fluctuations or external influences, they develop greater self-control and discernment. Difficulties continue to exist, but they stop being seen as insurmountable tragedies and are faced with greater clarity and resilience. This process also provides alignment with reality. Many live in constant escape, denying or repressing aspects of their lives they do not want to face. However, individuation teaches that true strength comes from accepting the world as it is. This does not mean conforming or accepting injustices, but rather understanding that there are aspects that cannot be changed, and that our energy should be directed toward what can truly be transformed. Another essential benefit is personal growth. By committing to their own evolution, a person unlocks dormant potential. Many talents are wasted because people are too busy trying to fit into social patterns or running away from their own fears. However, when someone learns to look inward and accepts their true nature, they realize they are capable of much more than they imagined. This separates those who merely react to circumstances from those who actively build the life they desire. Individuation does not eliminate life's challenges, but it provides the individual with the necessary tools to face them with wisdom. Those who deeply know themselves are not easily shaken by external changes because they have built a solid psychological foundation. This state of psychological wholeness does not mean the absence of problems, but rather a greater ability to navigate difficulties with balance and clarity. The 3 pillars of individuation. For individuation to happen consistently, 3 fundamental pillars need to be developed. Self-acceptance. The first step toward individuation is to fully accept oneself, without masks or denials. Many people go through life trying to hide their flaws or pretending to be something they are not, but this attempt to escape one's true essence only creates frustration and suffering. Jung stated that true transformation only occurs when we stop rejecting our shadows and learn to integrate them. This means recognizing weaknesses without shame and learning to deal with imperfections without emotional paralysis. After all, ignoring negative aspects of one's personality doesn't make them disappear. On the contrary, it makes them harder to control when they unexpectedly emerge. Self-knowledge can be achieved through deep reflection, therapy, or practices like therapeutic writing. An effective approach is to observe repetitive behavior patterns and try to identify their origins. For example, someone who consistently sabotages themselves in relationships might ask themselves, "What am I avoiding by acting this way? Is there an unresolved fear behind this?" This kind of questioning helps bring the unconscious to the conscious, allowing for real change. Accepting oneself does not mean settling. The goal is not to conform to limitations, but rather to recognize them so they can be overcome. When a person accepts who they truly are, they gain power over their own trajectory. It's like looking into a reflection without distortions and recognizing both strengths and areas for improvement. Individuation only progresses when this honesty with oneself becomes a constant commitment. Acceptance of others, especially family. Accepting others, especially family members, is one of the greatest challenges of individuation. Many people carry deep resentments from past experiences, especially those linked to childhood, parents' expectations, or unresolved conflicts. Absent parents, competitive siblings, and emotional frustrations can leave invisible marks that continue to influence behavior in adulthood. However, when we remain stuck in the past, we carry a burden that prevents us from moving forward. Blaming others may bring temporary relief, but in the long run, it traps us in a cycle of hurt. The truth is that no one can change what has already happened, but each person can decide how they want to interpret and deal with those experiences. Accepting others does not mean agreeing with everything they did or continuing to allow harmful dynamics. The goal is not to accept abuse or maintain toxic relationships, but to stop nurturing destructive emotions that add nothing to the present. A helpful practice for releasing resentments is writing a letter to those who caused pain, without the need to send it. Expressing feelings in words can help give new meaning to experiences, allowing the person to free themselves emotionally. By accepting that others are also imperfect and that each person acts according to their own limitations, it's possible to find more lightness and inner freedom. Having a meaningful goal. Having a clear purpose in life is essential to avoid stagnation. Without a well-defined goal, people tend to live on autopilot, just reacting to events without real direction. Jung believed that a human being needs something to drive them, something that justifies their existence and motivates them to grow. Without it, the mind gets lost in distractions, anxiety, and feelings of emptiness. A meaningful purpose does not need to be grand or impressive to others. The important thing is that it makes sense to the person pursuing it. For some, it may be contributing to the community, learning a new skill, or developing a personal project. For others, it might be finding a spiritual path, delving into a study, or simply living with more authenticity and truth. If someone feels they don't have a clear purpose, they can start with simple questions. What makes me feel alive? Or, if I could dedicate my life to something, what would it be? Setting small daily and weekly goals can help build a sense of direction. Those with a meaningful purpose experience less existential anguish because they understand that each step has a purpose. The process of individuation is not just an abstract concept, but a real tool to prevent us from being swept away by emotional turbulence and external influences. When a person doesn't know themselves deeply, they become vulnerable to internal conflicts, manipulations, and repetitive cycles of suffering. Individuation strengthens us so we can live more authentically and fully. Jung always emphasized that the responsibility for personal growth is individual. While many seek ready-made answers in groups, ideologies, or external influences, true transformation only happens from within. The world is full of people waiting for something to change their lives, but the reality is that no one can do that work for you. If you don't take control of your own mind, someone or something else will do it for you. Now, the question is, are you willing to look within and begin this process? Or will you continue ignoring repetitive patterns and letting the unconscious dictate your actions? Individuation is not an easy path, but it is the only one that leads to true freedom. If this content made sense to you, leave a comment and share your reflections. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue on this path of knowledge. And if you want to dive deeper into the subject, check out my ebook and the books I recommend. The link is in the first pinned comment.